All right, to get started, now the manual does say we need to evac the AC. We're going to try and get around that. If we do need to evac the AC, then we'll go ahead and do that. Otherwise, we're going to try and avoid that step. First thing I'm going to do is take the fan off. There's, see if you can see it right there, 10mm bolts. There's 4 of them. The fan and the shroud will come off. Take this radiator hose off with a catch pan underneath, and the belt. We'll get the belt off, and that'll just kind of expose this whole area and get us prepped and ready to go. Just trying to find a place to set up the camera. Not really much room or good angle, at least for this part. I'm just taking the fan off right now. If the fan just wants to spin on you while you're trying to break loose those bolts, you can use a screwdriver, a little pry bar or something to hold the fan. You know, those fan bolts off are a little slow and tedious, but we got it. Now I'll take the belt off. It's just a standard 3/8. You can always take a picture of the belt routing before you take the belt off. That way it's easy to remember. Now I'll take the hose off, just a couple of clamps, and it'll come out. So next I'm going to take the air conditioning unit off. There's a hose that comes over on this side and then a hose that goes to the other side. So it's not like you can just slough it over to one side or to the other. I'm hoping I can just kind of pull it forward and rest it out of the way. Anyway, there's 4 bolts here that come off and this connector that come off. So it should be pretty easy. Let me get a screwdriver for the connector. Let me examine this real quick and figure out my next move. So the next move is to remove the AC bracket along with the power steering pump as one assembly, is what they're saying, with all the hoses attached. So it looks like there's a bolt there. I see there's a bolt back here, a small one. It's hard to see if you can see where my finger is. But anyway, there's one right there you'll see, kind of small. And then between the pump and the bracket, there's one there. And then there's another one there. Those are the 4 I see. It doesn't say how many there are. So we'll start with those 4 and go from there. But the power steering pump doesn't need to be removed according to the manual. And it's interesting, if you know you don't have refrigerant in your system, you can disconnect the pump, the compressor from here. That's up to you. I'm going to leave mine the way it is. If you have refrigerant in here, don't disconnect that, because now refrigerant's just blowing to the atmosphere, and it's illegal for 1, but 2, it's not very nice. So let me start pulling this apart, and if I run into any snags, I'll let you know. So let me show you. The reason why all this stuff has to be moved out of the way is because of this arm right here is in the way of this cover coming off. So now that we have it all undone, we can move this around at our leisure. And there's a bolt here. And there's a bolt down below under this pulley. And then it's really just these clips come off. There may be one more bolt, but definitely those two. And then the clips and that whole cover can separate. So we just need this to be moved out of the way. I don't think this angle is any better, but we'll try it. 8mm bolts for those. So we have to take the crank pulley off, or the harmonic balancer needs to come off. But before we do that, we're going to put it at top dead center. Now the manual had you remove spark plugs, and that'll reduce compression, so you're not trying to fight the compression of the engine while cranking or turning that crankshaft. Timing belt's broke, so some valves are already open, so it wasn't very hard. But let me show you here. You have 30, 20, 10. Those are all before top dead center. And then you have a TC, that's top center. And then a little mark on the crank. Just a little notch mark on the crank lines up with that TC, and there's a little notch for that as well. Now that is cylinder number 1, top dead center. So now we can go ahead and pull this crank off and feel confident that our timing is where it needs to be. So there's not enough room to get my impact in between the radiator and the crank pulley. There's probably lots of tricks on how to hold the crank in place while breaking off the bolt. My trick that I'm going to use is just pull the radiator. It's a manual transmission, pretty easy to pull the radiator, a couple of bolts, lower hose, and the thing slides right out. So now, I still don't have room. Alright, so I have a smaller socket. It's not an impact. This is the impact and the height. So if you had a shallow impact, that would be the best. 22mm is a 7/8, so they must be the same equivalent. Fits over. Now I have room. Now taking the radiator out was still the necessary step for this. Out it comes, and now I'm going to get my puller and pull it out. Just a little tip, so my puller, this isn't long enough to get in there to pull on it, so you need a little spacer so you can use a spark plug socket. This is 5/8 to put in there. Then this goes on the back of it, and that gives you like a little extension. This is small enough to fit. You'll know what I'm talking about when you see it. I upgraded to an 18mm. Less wobbly. So I'm struggling with is pulling that crank pulley off. It's being just a little stubborn. So got the outer cover off. The crankshaft does not have to come out to get the outer cover off, but it still will have to come off to get the new belt on. Here's the broken belt. Just to show you how I have my puller set up. So that's the socket in between. That's actually the 22mm. I was struggling for a little bit. I was being a little too ambitious, so I put the 7/8, the smaller one, in first. Got it to start backing out until my threads bottomed out, and then I swapped back to the 22. So I'm almost finished pulling it out. Just wanted to show you the setup so you can see that spacer. Alright, there it goes. So on the back of the pulley is the tone ring for your crank position sensor. So we want to just be sure we're not banging that up when we're setting this down somewhere. So that's off. So now we can just clean it up real good. If you're replacing the tensioner for the timing belt, then we'll get that off. Otherwise, we could just slap the new belt on. Just to show you, I know there's a lot of trees and shadows and stuff making it not the best filming, but this is your main cam. You have this over here. This is the tensioner, and then that's the crank right there. So because of pulling it off the way we did, the crank actually moved, so I'm gonna have to find top dead center again, just to be cool so you guys can see what looking at it on a camera might be like. You can see that's the piston right there, it's the cylinder wall there. So now as I turn it, you'll get to watch it move up. And I just keep going right about there. Oh, maybe a little more. So right there is top dead center. And that, if you look at the keyway, bring you down, you see the keyway on the crank, it's almost straight up and down. It's just a little to the right of 12 o'clock. It's like 12:30, pretty much 12, but just a little past. But either way, just so you have another reference, yours might do the same thing, is straight up and down. But we are now top dead center, so let's go ahead and start putting the belt on. So now we want to set the cam timing and the oil pump timing. This is the oil pump sprocket here, that's the cam up there, and it's saying align the triangle on the camshaft with the triangle on the timing belt cover. And then the oil pump. Align diamond on the pump with the diamond on the belt cover. So how that looks, right here on the cam you have a triangle. And then right here on the belt cover you have a triangle. So you want those to line up. Then on the oil pump you have that diamond on the belt cover and a diamond. This is a triangle. Somewhere on this plate will be a diamond. So diamond to diamond and triangle to triangle. Alright, I didn't show it off camera, but I did replace the tensioner pulley. I recommend replacing it if you're going to do this. Anyway, you're in there, it comes in with the kit. But this, you can definitely tell, is just worn out. Spins too freely, and you can kind of hear some bearing noise. So a new one, no big deal. It's a 17 mil bolt here and this 13 mil bolt here. And how I got mine off is just took the 13 off first, and then this wants to just kind of rotate a little, then take the 17 off, and then it just comes out. Put it back on, and then you'll need this like a pry bar just to get in between the 17 mil and the pulley, and then just turn it, and that'll get that whole thing to kind of turn enough to get the bolt back in, that 13 mil bolt. So not too hard, actually really easy to do. You just need a prying apparatus. I don't know what size this is, probably, I don't know, 18 inches I'd imagine. Pry bar, I have a smaller one. It doesn't quite give me the leverage that I need, so a little bigger one. I have a extra huge one, and that was just too big. So all right, so now we are ready to put the belt on. Hopefully you can kind of see. So what we want to do is get this tensioner pulled all the way back and then tightened, so then the belt can go around it freely. So again, just using a pry bar, getting in there. Now be careful, because this pry bar could roll and slip on the pulley, and that might hurt. Now Ford does make a special tool for this. So what I'm going to do is just put tension on it and then tighten up that 13 millimeter bolt, and that'll lock it out of the way. I'm going to move you guys in a better position. Okay, we are locked out of the way. We could put our belt on. We start with the crank pulley first, and then move counterclockwise to the oil pump pulley, and then up to the camshaft, and then around the tensioner. So we could just line it up the best that we can, trying to make sure that there's no really loose slack. We want to make sure that the teeth and everything just follow that belt all the way around. Now this is harder because the belt broke, so I have to start from scratch. Once the belt's on, I'm going to show you a trick that if you're just changing the belt and the belt is still good, the timing is still good, but you're just changing the belt because it's just time for it, I'm going to show you a trick that makes installation 1,000 times easier. Now that this is on, I'm going to loosen the bolt for the tensioner and let it tension the belt. Once the tensioner is let loose, just double check your marks and I'll show you. So the cam is still lined up pretty good. That's off just a wee. But I believe my crank is off an entire tooth because it's not straight up and down. And it's supposed to be straight up and down according to the manual. But I'm off just a little. So I'm going to take tension off, take the belt off, move the crank into the actual position where it should be, and then tension it back up. So just double checking your marks once you have it all together. But this would have been a tooth off. So these are the instructions. We're right here. Rotate tensioner assembly against belt with torque wrench 30 to 33 foot-pounds, then tighten the adjusting bolt. So it's not enough just for that spring tension from the tensioner. You want to give it a little more just to make sure that it's about 26 to 33 foot-pounds. Or 30 to 33 foot-pounds is what I mean. Then we tighten the adjusting bolt to 26 to 33. Then tighten the spring bolt 30 to 40. Before tightening my bolts down, what I did was turn the crank 2 revolutions. It equals 1 revolution on the cam. And then double check my marks. So you can see my marks lined right back up. On here, they lined up. So what that does, it takes any slack out of the timing belt and puts it on the tensioner. So then the tensioner can tighten up just a little more. And then you can go through the tightening process that was mentioned in the manual. So those are torqued down. So now we're ready for reassembly. Before that, I may start it up real quick. Put the number 1 spark plug back in its hole and move these out of the way just a little more and give it a good fire up just to see that it's running fine and we don't have anything else crazy going on. So we need the crank back on before we can start it because it won't start without this tone ring for the crank sensor. So we'll put it back on. So line up the keyway. Put your bolt back in. Let me look up torque specs in sequence. Here's our spec. The crankshaft damper bolt or the crank pulley is 93 to 121 foot-pounds. So I'll let you guys decide how you want to torque that. So now with the crankshaft on, we should be able to start it just for a second. All right, we are in business. So let's slap everything back together. So this is my tip. If the belt is good, but it's just cracked and worn and ready to be replaced, what I would recommend is, so line it up like normal. So you got your triangle on the triangle, the diamond on the diamond, and then this is top dead center where it's supposed to be. Once that's all like that, then mark your cam with a dot on the cam tooth, 2 dots on the belt tooth. Then do the same thing on your oil pump. Behind here, of course, you can get to it. And then do the same thing. Mark 1 dot on the gear tooth, 2 dots on the belt. Then the crank with a different color, again, do the same thing. This would be on the bottom of the crank gear, but do the same thing with a different color. 1 tooth on the gear, 2 teeth on the belt. Then take the belt off like normal and transfer these belt marks onto your new belt. Then when you put it back on, all you're doing is lining up these marks. A lot of newer vehicles have timing belt marks just like that, and the belts come marked just like this. For some reason this vehicle doesn't have anything like that, no big deal, but you can do it yourself by just marking it the way I have it. This is just an example. If I were to pull this off because the belt didn't break, that's how I would do it. So this is just me tightening it up. I'm not going to bore you with all that. But you can get your finger behind the pulley and you can kind of feel where that bolt hole is on the mating surface of the pump. So you kind of feel it, move the pulley to line up, move the fan to all line up, and just do your best. It takes a little patience, but you get it. Good thing they give you 4 bolts because I tend to just drop them on the ground. They fall out of my hands. But all right, well, I'm going to just move forward. I'm going to pause the video here, move forward, just getting that fan on. And then really after that is the serpentine belt, filling it up with coolant and bleeding it. Just so you have the torque specs for those fan bolts is 13 to 16 foot-pounds. And in all reality, you can't get a torque wrench on there unless you have a crow's foot adapter. This is belt routing if you need it, with AC, without AC. All right, there you go. That's how you can replace a timing belt on these older Ford Ranger 2.3 liters. Not too bad. Some of the maybe trouble spots that you could run into is getting that crank pulley off. Possibly a little trouble there. And that tensioner pulley. It really wasn't that bad, but having that pry bar, be careful because it could slip off because you're prying on a wheel. So it could roll and slip off, so just be careful of that. Other than that, you know, not too bad. The AC did not have to be evacuated, so yay for that. I'm not quite sure why they had you evacuate it, but not necessary. The bleeding procedure, I did not show you that for the coolant. What they recommend is pulling on the thermostat housing. You have the main tube that comes up for the radiator, and then you have a little small tube that comes off the side for the heater. They say pull that little hose off, fill it up, and wait for coolant to start coming out of that little heater hose. And then once it starts coming out, plug it back in, and then top it off the rest of the way. And then you should be bubble free or air pocket free at that point. Another thing to do is turn the heater on, full blast hot, drive it around, make sure you get really good heat coming out, and then that'll also tell you that there's no air pockets in the heater core. All right, well, that's it. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe. See you on the next one.